Hello and welcome to day 3 of the virtual summit on Ag Tech at the Tuck School of Business. My name is Elizabeth Lanchowski-Holmes and I'm a second year student here at Tuck. Today's sessions focus on the future of agriculture. We'll be covering a range of topics including fintech and ag tech, early stage investing, precision agriculture, data analytics, marketplaces, robotics, and more. Additionally, our inaugural pitch competition finals will take place tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, where 4 startups will be in the running for a cash prize and valuable one-on-one time with VCs. We're kicking off today's summit with some remarks by our charity partner, SUSU Community Farm. All proceeds from registration donations will be donated to this amazing organization. I'm very excited to be joined here today by Amber Arnold, the co-executive director of SUSU Community Farm. Amber is one of the co-founders of SUSU Community Farm, an Afro-Indigenous farm and land-based healing center in southern Vermont that elevates Vermont's land and foodways. Amber is passionate about creating transformative systems and spaces of change in Vermont that center around our innate needs to experience safety, belonging, connection, and liberation in the spaces we inhabit and the communities that we're a part of. Through her work as a somatic practitioner, collaborative director at the SUSU Community Farm, and as an organizer of racial and healing justice, Amber aspires to bring new opportunities for community growth, transformation, repair, and reclamation in Vermont. Thank you so much, Amber, for being here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Amber for a presentation on SUSU.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to share about SUSU. So my name is Amber, and I'm one of the co-directors of SUSU, as you just heard, and my ancestors were brought here non-consensually from different places in Africa, and so currently I'm inhabiting land on Turtle Island, on the Elnu-Abenaki homelands, Wantastigock, also known as Brattleboro, Vermont. You can go to the next slide. And so first I want to just start by sharing some gratitude for the elevated ancestors that come before me and before us and who have paved the way and have really created a lot of the foundations of the work that all of us, contribute to ag, where all of that wisdom comes from. So I want to lift up our collective ancestors: Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Watley, Fannie Lou Hamer, Daisy Turner, George Washington Carver, Emma Dupree, and all of our ancestors who did and did not survive the Middle Passage, and the ones who chose the water. So if you give a hungry man food, he will eat it. But if you give him land, he will grow his own food. This is a quote by Fannie Lou Hamer, and this is really kind of the foundation of where SUSU started. SUSU started, we had formed a healing collective before our nonprofit, and that healing collective was really about creating a space for Black, Indigenous people of color to thrive and experience safety and have places of belonging and connection. And we had an apothecary where we grew our own herbs and lots of healing classes and things like that. And we had to shut our doors down when COVID happened, and what we started to notice was the impacts that COVID was having on Black and brown people in our community, people who did not have access to the resources needed to, purchase nourishing food and things like these. And so one of the first things that we did was we started a GoFundMe to purchase CSA boxes, community supported agriculture boxes, for our people, because we felt like on top of COVID, all the things going on with Black and brown people being murdered by state-sanctioned violence, that on top of all of these things, the one thing that we shouldn't have to worry about is being able to access life-giving and nourishing foods, especially with the history that we know that many Black and brown people are killed by state-sanctioned violence, but even more Black and brown people are killed by food-related illnesses, and so we know that nourishment is so important. And so our target was to raise $14,000 to purchase 26 boxes of food for families, and within 3 or 4 days we had raised well above that. And so we continued our GoFundMe to start raising money towards the purchase of land, so that we could create a space that would in perpetuity be a safe place for Black, Indigenous people of color to have access to places to grow food, to access food, to have access to programs for youth, and all kinds of different things that really meet the needs of our people that are not currently being met by our current systems. And so we really wanted to create a space to do that, and that's really what SUSU is about, is really carrying on this legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer and all of our ancestors who have shared such beautiful wisdom with us. And so SUSU Community Farm is an Afro-Indigenous stewarded farm and land-based healing center in southern Vermont. We offer life-affirming spaces for Black, Indigenous people of color to thrive. And this is a picture of some of our staff at SUSU, and our team is growing as we get more funding to be able to bring more people in. So currently there's Naomi and I were the collaborative directors of SUSU. Jabari is our farm manager and, new farmer learning how to farm and grow food, Afro-Indigenous, culturally relevant crops for our people to have free access to food. Jamal is the CSA coordinator and administrator right now, and will soon transition to be a facilities manager when we do have a farm. And then we have Jess Salves, who is our grant writer, and Hannah, who is coming on as our volunteer CSA coordinator manager. So 98% of farmable land is owned by white people, and people of color have been systematically displaced, dispossessed, and otherwise excluded from these treasures by centuries via the appropriation of their lands, disconnected now for generations from their landed birthright. BIPOC are disproportionately impacted by health inequities, debilitating illness, death, and trauma. And it's also important to name that in Vermont, of the 7,000 farms that are here, about 17 of those 7,000 are either owned or operated by people of color, which is a very small amount. And in Windham County, where I live, 0 of those farms are owned by people of color. So the SUSU project is really, really important work that's happening in southern Vermont to really kind of change that narrative. So our current programming, currently we have multiple different programs, and every single one of our programs directly connects back to the earth and to seeing earth as a sovereign being, and to really changing the narrative of seeing ourselves as these creatures of domination that can dominate and control and cause and perpetuate violence on everyone else, and really starting to shift our narrative to seeing ourselves as beings that are part of this interconnected ecosystem, where we're not on the top of the food chain. We're actually part of this reciprocal process with the earth, and bringing ourselves back into that place so that we can be part of creating a sustainable environment that many, many generations that come after us will be able to live on. And so some of our current programs include our Box of Resilience. And so that is a free, culturally affirming box of food for Black, Indigenous people of color in the Windham County area. And really our focus with this program is that we believe that food should be considered a birthright and not a commodity. And anything that the earth gives to us abundantly and freely should be something that all of us should have access to, and that we shouldn't have to labor or work for something that we need to survive. And so our Box of Resilience program is one of the ways that we grow culturally relevant Afro-Indigenous fruits and veggies, and then we distribute them to members of our community throughout the season for free. And there's also a lot of small businesses that contribute to these boxes with maple syrup and eggs and meat and salves and like all kinds of things that they create to really show people of color in our area that they are worthy and that we do care about them, and that we believe that this is a birthright that they should have access to. Another one of our programs that we are going to create once we are on land is called Storyteller Gardens. And so these are cultural heritage gardens that are all, each garden will be grown to specific lineages that reflect the people who are participants in our CSA program. And so this program really connects people back with the legacies of their ancestors, how their people grow food, and all of this wisdom that we've been separated from through colonization. And we plan to use all different kinds of methods for fertilizing and soil amendments and all of these different things so that we're really working with the earth instead of working against the earth. And one of the examples of that is by creating our own soil amendments using, like going to an orchard and collecting all of the rotten apples from the ground and making apple cider vinegar, and then extracting minerals from like cow bones and other compost material that we then use to pour onto the soil to make our own soil amendments. And there's many different ways to make soil amendments that actually feed the earth and that make more sense for the areas that we live in, whereas a lot of soil amendments that we buy in the stores are really, really extractive. They use slave labor mining and all different kinds of practices that are really harmful. So we are really committed to looking at all of the ways that we have an impact and growing our food in a way that really honors and nourishes the earth and all of the beings that are connected to earth. Another one of the programs that we are building right now is called the Youth to Liberation Pipeline Program. And so this program is an alternative to some of our mental health institutions and DCF programs and other programs in the state of Vermont. It's kind of like a space where youth can access political education, where they can connect back to the earth with BIPOC peers and different programming that's relevant and makes sense to them and helps them to move through the trauma of colonization that's held in their bodies and really be part of a community who deeply cares for them and can help to really build the next generation of youth so that they can come into the world and really heal from a lot of the trauma that we've inhabited intergenerationally and create something different. And lastly, we have the Trauma Conscious School of Liberation. We have multiple programs here. One of those programs is called Unbodying White-Bodied Supremacy, and this program is specifically for white folks, and it supports them in learning how to, in a really embodied way, align their actions with what they care about most, like what are our embodied values, what is most important to us, and how do we align what's most important with us with the ways that we act and we show up in the world. And so these programs support people in learning about white supremacy, how it shows up in our bodies, how capitalism shows up in our bodies and in the places that we inhabit, and how to reconnect and rebuild our relationship with earth, with our ancestral legacies, with the other beings that are on the earth, and how we can work together to create much needed change towards liberation. And we have a similar program for people of color, really focused on racialized trauma, and we have another program that's a BIPOC herbalism program which connects people of color to it's an herbalism program for people of color that connects them back with the wisdom of their ancestors in the form of those medicine traditions. So land is transformation. Access to Earth's greatest treasures is required for whole community wellness. Clean air, fresh water, lush land, connection to the interdependence of all of life, growing nutritious foods, healthy housing, rites and rituals, and meaningful activities. So one thing that we like to center a lot is that as Malcolm X said, that all liberation is based on land, and that land is really the basis of everything. You know, land is the thing that people hoard, land is the thing that people exploit, land is the thing that is taken away from many, many people and that many people don't have access to, and land is really the basis of our survival. Our survival depends on land. And so land is also a place that can create deep, meaningful change and transformation and collective healing, and we really need to be able to have access to land in order to be able to have access to health and wellness and belonging and safety and connection and all of these things that are so meaningful and important and that help us to move through the ways that the trauma of colonization has impacted us. And so this is one of the reasons why access to land is so important for the SUSU project, and being able to acquire a space on land that we can really house these programs in this wisdom, so that people who have been systematically displaced from land can have access to this beautiful resource. The SUSU Community Farm challenges the notion of land ownership in southern Vermont. Everyone, regardless of their financial means, should be able to own land and access Earth's greatest treasures. Our Afro-Indigenous Land Sovereignty Project will be a multifaceted place for reconnection, for co-creative, restorative, and reparative wellness, featuring the leadership and voices of BIPOC practitioners and participants. And so one of the things with the land that we are hoping to purchase and finish fundraising for is that we are, planning to design it in a way that this will be a space in perpetuity that people of color will always be able to access and will always be able to go to. And as climate change, starts to impact all of these places in the world, and where people of color in other areas of our country will have to migrate, and where a lot of people with access to a lot of wealth and resources will be able to be acquiring land, as I think many of us have seen in COVID, so much of the land being sold to people with a lot of wealth. This will specifically be a space that people will be able to migrate to, and that in perpetuity there will always be a place on land for people of color to find safety and connection and belonging. Dig deep enough into many of the problems this country faces and you will soon hit land. Soaring inequality and exclusion, the massive cost of renting or buying a decent home, repeated financial crises sparked by housing asset bubbles, the collapse of wildlife and ecosystems, the lack of public amenities, the way land is owned and controlled underlies them all, yet it scarcely features in political discussions or decisions. George Monbiot. So this is actually a picture of the farm that we're in the process of purchasing, and it's located in Newfane, Vermont. It's about a 37-acre farm right on the West River, and this is where we plan to create the Afro-Indigenous Heritage Gardens, fruit forests, wild pollinator gardens, healing herb paths. There's a sugar house on the land, so we're also planning to create a program as part of the Youth to Liberation Pipeline program for BIPOC youth to learn how to make maple syrup and hopefully sell that in stores locally. And then over time we'll have, some animals, a farm store, produce production, indoor and outdoor spaces for meetings, workshops, trainings, and celebrations, participant and residential accommodations, and it's about 12 minutes outside of Brattleboro. So these are some of the things that we're currently raising money towards. And so we can move past this because this is kind of like, yeah. So thank you so much for listening, and I would love to answer any questions if anyone has questions.
Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing SUSU's story and your goals and impact that you're having in Vermont and the broader community in New England. It's really exciting.
Yeah, thanks.
As a reminder to the audience, you can place questions in the Ask a Question box at the bottom of the screen. And I think I'll throw one in of my own. You mentioned at the beginning, Amber, about your family history. I would love to hear more about that and your kind of understand a little bit more of your inspiration behind founding SUSU Community Farm.
A little more of our inspiration behind founding it. Yeah. You know, our inspiration behind founding the farm is that, you know, we live in Vermont, which is one of the whitest states in Vermont, but that doesn't mean that there's not people of color here, because there is a lot of people of color here. And one of the things that we see living here is that a lot of people don't experience safety and they don't have the ability to stay here. There's a really high turnover rate. And so whereas we saw a lot of people or organizations focusing on advertising to try to keep people here, we really feel like the important thing to do is to create spaces that people feel like they belong and that they want to be in, and that's really what gets people to stay. And we, you know, like, all of us have backgrounds in political organizing, and we know that, like, or we believe that, like, this is really the basis of our ability to thrive, is the ability to have access to places where that can happen, places where we get to kind of like create the story and create the resources that we need and that we know that we need, because oftentimes when we're forced to rely on other people who are not, you know, part of our community, they don't really have clear understandings of what we need, but we know what we need, and when we have access to the ability to create what we need, we can create, you know, spaces where all people can thrive and where we can really contribute in a meaningful way. And that's like what we're really passionate about and what's really important to us, and we all have a really deep connection with the earth, and so that's really kind of what started it. I mean, like, we had started the Healing Collective, and then after COVID happened, we had been planning to purchase a farm in the future, but that kind of really intensified and made us move a little bit quicker towards that goal, because we saw the need, you know, and most of the work that we do is just responding to the long-term needs of what our people say that they need, and then creating those things and creating room for those visions and dreams and imaginations to become reality.
It's really inspiring, and just great to hear your mission and your plans for the future. And I imagine that this type of organization, with your goals, might be relevant in other places across the U.S. Do you envision this expanding into other geographies in the future, or have any plans for that beyond Southern Vermont, maybe one day?
Yeah, we definitely talk a lot about that, and I think, like, the interesting thing about Vermont for us is that we have a really clear understanding of the people and the landscape and all of the dynamics that happen in Vermont. So, like, SUSU is really very, very customized and specific to Vermont. And so, like, what we've talked about is creating this kind of, like, franchise model in the future where we have SUSU is in other places, but that we really have, like, the donors and the resources and all of these things, and, like, when they're in other parts of the country that, like, we don't have a relationship or knowledge to, that we just kind of bring people in from those communities and learn, like, what is it that you want and need in your community, and that we're able to just resource them and give them the blueprint to respond to the needs of their communities, which might look different than in Vermont. So it would kind of be like this process of creating and resourcing other SUSUs, but that would look a little bit different based on the needs of communities around the country.
Yeah, that's a great plan. It sounds incredibly compelling, and we hope that we can help you guys raise awareness for what you're doing in Vermont, and hopefully spread the word to other places that do this all over the country. I have a question from Caitlin Martin. What type of support makes the biggest difference to SUSU Community Farm, and how can people get more involved to help? this might be particularly relevant to the MBA students here in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I feel like the support that makes the biggest, there's two things that I think make the biggest difference for SUSU. One of them is people who want to be part of our community and who want to be part of creating the change and just kind of like join us in the learning and the creation and like volunteering or just being part of the work that we're doing. That's one huge way. And the other huge way is people who have access to financial resources or abundant financial resources that are interested in, you know, like investing in things that really create true systems change, that want to support our project. So I think just like the human power and the resource power are the most helpful ways to support. And just people who have access to things that they might not be using, you know, like wood or different materials for building and things like that.
I imagine some Dartmouth students would be interested in volunteering at your farm once it's up and running, making the trip down there. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, definitely. That would be awesome.
We have another question from Skylar Dalton related to what you were talking about in your presentation on soil effects, and she's wondering if you're using a biodynamic approach.
Yeah, you know, the approach that we're really using is we have like connections from other farmers in different places in Africa, and then also some folks in this area. So we're really trying to practice using Afro-Indigenous technologies and learning, you know, the ways that our people really look to mimic the way that nature works, and really kind of like creating soil amendments and things based on that. Like, for example, like using leaf mold from the woods right next to where you live has all the nutrients that your soil needs, because those are materials that are right in your area. And so really just kind of like taking that wisdom of watching the way that nature grows and watching the ways that our ancestors have grown, and really learning from those kind of technologies.
That's great to hear how you incorporate such a holistic approach to everything that you're doing. And we have another question, which is really interesting, from Evan Ramsey. Thank you so much, audience members, for participating and adding some great questions into the chat down below. But Evan says, how do you think folks in ag tech and ag funding can better advance racial equity in agriculture?
Yeah, I think that the best way to do that is to, you know, really look at ways that you can support people of color-led missions and bring more. I think like one of the things like is helping like sign on their bills or give them more relevancy, and give them, you know, like the more BIPOC-led initiatives have support and backing from more and more people, the more that those things can shift. And so I think just kind of like moving resources and all different kinds of resources in that direction is really the best way to support that, because it's like people of color aren't really looking for people to tell them what to do or do things on behalf of them. They're really looking for people who want to support the work that they're doing and really show up to allow them to have the space that they need to dream and vision and then create on those dreams. So really just kind of like showing up for the vision and moving resources to support those things, I think.
Well said. We have one last question from Connie Bowen in the audience. Can you talk a little bit more about market access? How are you planning to move the products which you'll produce on your farm, either going direct to consumer online or wholesale? Do you have any plans in that department?
Yeah, I mean, we're really not trying to be like a production farm. We're really trying to just be growing food for our people, and we're not trying to grow like big scale food. Like we're trying to grow like specifically for people in our community. So it will mostly be like right now with our CSA program, we have like volunteer drivers who deliver the boxes. When we're on the farm, it will be like people coming to the farm to get stuff and the delivery drivers, and then we'll have like some stuff, you know, like our maple syrup and stuff that will probably be on our website and in like local co-ops and stuff, but we don't want to get big in a way that would make us be extracting from the earth. But also, like, you know, like with our tinctures and the herbal products we make, those are all, we sell them on our website, so things like that we would continue to do in that way.
I'm going to be on the lookout for that maple syrup. Thank you so much, Amber, for taking the time to be with us today. We're really excited to be partnering with SUSU and really inspired by what you're doing in Vermont. So thank you so much. And next up, we have a fireside chat, Feeding the World, a conversation with Kevin Lockett of Fulcrum Global Capital and Brett Long of Antera Capital. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for inviting me to this.
Thanks, Amber. Bye.